So my name is Danny, and I know many of you are familiar faces on the chat. And I want to reiterate again how thankful we all are as TJCCNA to have all the presenters here. We've all given a lot of good advice to people who are impacted by COVID-19. So the message here is to stay strong, stay stronger together, as I borrow President Chen, his message before. And so let's move on. This is the last portion. I'll promise to make this real quick. I got my timer going on, so I'm not gonna bore you guys with immigration. All right, so. Due to the COVID-19, there are some issues that would affect people. And these are individuals who are not born in the US, because if you're born in the US, then you're a US citizen. However, if today you are an international student, if you are a visitor, if you are somebody who is here on a work visa, or if you are somebody who has a US citizen child and you like to stay with them, what are some of the things that are negatively impacted because of COVID-19? So let's take a look on the things that we're going to discuss today. First of all, for visitors, because visitors, when they come into the United States, they have a finite amount of allotted time to stay here. If they need to extend their options to stay, what are those options? And the second thing we're going to cover is employees. So employees who are here in the US on work visas, be it the H-1B, E-2, L-1, or other types of visas, how are they going to stay here in the face of COVID-19, decreased wages, decreased hours, or even loss in jobs? And of course, there is the green card holders. Did you know? Every year, there's about 1 million more green card holders in the United States. And currently, across the world, everywhere, there's about 13.8 million green card holders. Now, there must be several of these individuals who are abroad and who choose not to fly back because of safety issues, health concerns due to COVID-19. So if they are abroad and they do not come back in, what are the issues that's going to face them? And of course, we're going to cover other things such as the general rules of thumb as to how to maintain lawful status here in the United States. And these are just general pointers in helping people keep their status, because at the end of the day, if the eventual goal is to stay here long term, as I'm sure many of us are or were at one point in time, then this is how. So I know many of us here are already US citizens or green card holders. Some may be here on visas, but these are all good information that we can share with the community because we are an immigrant community. And doesn't matter if it's Taiwanese, people from China, wherever, when they come in, they have to obey the rules here. Now, let's start with visitors. There are two types of visitors, one being the traditional type, which is the B1, B2 visa in your passport. Now, normally when you come in, there's a 6-month stay, legal stay here in the US for you to be a visitor. If today, due to COVID-19, you need to extend your stay due to medical, due to change of flight, or due to any other reason that does not allow you to fly, there is the ability to do an extension of your visitor status. The extension filing can be done as soon as 90 days after your initial entry into the US. However, from technicality point of view, if today your reason for extending is to buy more time here in the US, then my recommendation is to file as late as possible, because you are trying to get as much time during the immigration processing as possible so that you can extend for however long they're processing to allow you additional time, maybe several months, to make sure you have a return flight or make sure your medical issue has been cleared up before you leave. So for B1, B2 extensions, the earliest time is 90 days after. However, if today you're only trying to buy more time, then that's filed later. Okay. In terms of the reasons that people do this, obviously COVID-19 right now. So with COVID-19, there are a lot of things with medical issues. People can't fly. Hopefully you didn't contract this or your friend, so that it's on their own choice to not fly away from the US. And a lot of people know that right now, one of the easiest ways to contract this is in airports and in that tin can that you fly for 14 hours. Therefore, some people would like to extend their status because of this medical reason. Now, keep in mind, everything that we file with immigration, unless you were born in the US, everything we file with immigration is a privilege. It is something that we ask them for. It is not something that is a right. Therefore, it is possible that these extension requests may be denied. So therefore, it's a good idea to make sure the reasons are being well laid out for immigration to be convinced that you cannot fly. Okay? Now, what if today you came in on the B1, B2 and you would like to change your status? I no longer want to be a visitor. I want to go to school. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to work. Well, it may be possible, but it depends on what type of changes you can do or what status you can change into. So if today you want to be a student, well, you do have to go to school. Can't just, pay a school and hang out. You can't. And other things such as if today you have a foreign company and you're being sent over or you could be sent over, then there is the possibility of doing other work visa type of stuff. But keep in mind, just like extension, the earliest filing time is 90 days after you enter. Now, for Taiwan nationals and for nationals of, I believe, 38 other countries, there's the ESTA. The ESTA is what we call landed or electronic visa. You don't have to go to a consulate to get. So for a lot of Taiwanese nationals, they're very familiar with ESTA. They are also familiar with that fact that ESTA cannot be extended. ESTA cannot change your status. So what do you do in the face of COVID-19? Well, the CBP, which are the good folks who you meet when you get off the plane, these people in the blue uniform, or dark black. Anyway, so these CBP officers and the CBP office is able to allow a 30-day extension if, and this is the caveat, 30-day extension to your 90-day stay if the airline has canceled your flight and rebooked you beyond the original 90-day stay. If you do not have these two things right now, it's extremely difficult for the CBP to grant you the additional 30 days. We have had success with clients who have medical issues who were granted the additional 30 days, but that's logical. It can't be, I don't want to fly, that tin can scares me, I should just stay and change the air flying ticket myself. No, that doesn't work. It has to be an airline forcing the individual to extend their stay, therefore beyond the 90-day original ESTA stay. Now, what if today there's the opportunity to file for a green card while you're here in the US? Keep in mind, if you're on the ESTA and during the COVID-19 you decided, like to stay, there are only certain types of green card that will allow you to do this, okay? Normally it's family members. So for example, you getting married to somebody, or if today you are a parent of, I know we're all young, so it may not be the case, but if you have a 21-year-old US citizen son or daughter who wants to petition for you, go ahead, that's fine too. So immediate family types of green card filing. All right, so these are the available options for people who are here on visitor, either as a B1, B2 or an ESTA to extend their stay or to change their stay. Now, what if today you are here on a work visa, especially that really interesting thing and quite difficult and things that lawyers don't like, the H-1B. Okay, now, obviously with COVID-19, Brian covered, Sylvia covered, all the previous attorneys covered, reduce hours, reduce wages, or even loss in employment. What do you do in that situation? First of all, for the H-1B, you have to be very, very careful about what the case LCA says. All right, this LCA is a magic piece of paper. This LCA says the number of hours that you have to work at minimum, the wage that the employer needs to pay you, as well as your place of employment. So say, for example, if an employer hires me on the H-1B and says Danny Chen will work 20 hours a week for $20 an hour at an Irvine location, that's my minimum. Obviously, the employer can change that by increasing my hours, paying me more, lovely. But in the face of COVID-19, a lot of people are facing reduced hours, reduced wages, or even loss in employment. So be careful of what the LCA says. Where can you find the LCA? Good news for you, every employer who files an H-1B must have the LCA available to the public, meaning to you too. So if you're on the H-1B, get the LCA, understand your own minimum. Now, how about changing location? Because now we have to work from home unless you're essential, like some of my staff, But if today you're working from home, is your home the same location as the H-1B? Normally, if your commute is 40 minutes or less driving, chances are probably yes. Okay, it is measured by the metropolitan. Okay, it is not measured by street or census tracts. It's by metropolitan. So if your commute is relatively short, then yes, you may still be in the same zone. However, it is always a good idea to check with your company's immigration attorney to make sure your home address is within the same metropolitan area as the LCA. Now, what if today it's a reduction in hours that's below the LCA? Well, the employer and the employee will have to make that difficult choice of, do we want to go and amend this H-1B? The recommendation from attorneys, of course, is you have to amend, because if you don't and you fall under the LCA requirement, you may lose your H-1B status. Meaning, even though you're still working, although working from home, even though there's COVID-19 and everyone is trying to be as reasonable as possible, you have fallen out of status because you have not complied with the LCA. So with the amendments, it doesn't mean that if you had an H-1B before, you will, of course, get the H-1B later. So that's something very, very important to know. An amendment is treated like a new filing. So it's not just piggybacking on the previous. Therefore, be careful of what you file. Be careful if there is any changes to the job description and whatnot. Treat it like a new filing. What if today there's furlough? Or there's an employee said, I want to take a leave. So if it is an employer-enforced furlough, meaning you still have your job, you're just not being paid. Is that H-1B compliant? No, of course not, because it is below the LCA requirement. But what if today it is an employee-elected leave? Say, for example, I got sick. My folks got sick. I take care of them. My dog got sick. All right. Now, in that case, the employee could elect to take a leave, and that normally would not affect the H-1B because it's the employee who chooses to leave, not the employer who furloughs the employee. All right. So minor detail changes over there, but be careful what the HR and be careful of any writing that's been passed around. Is it employer or is it employee enforced? Okay. Now, question. How long can the employee elected leave be? Well, that depends on the situation. If today you're ghastly sick, you can't go to work, and you're afraid to spread the virus around in the workplace, blah, 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 well, take as much time as you need to get healthy. But what if today you decide that you're going to take a year break with no good reason to do so? Then you have to be more careful, because at the end of the day, every time we communicate with immigration, we have to explain why something happened. What if today you are being laid off? If you're being laid off, first of all, sorry to hear that, but know that as an H-1B, when you're being laid off, you have a 60-day grace period to try to find a new employer, pack up your bags, or change to another status. If you're going to change to another status, I would recommend start looking at things such as schools and use that as a fallback. You may be able to find another employer during the 60-day. However, always understand all of your options first. Don't have the tunnel vision of, oh my God, I gotta find work. And by day 58 or day 59, you're like, oh, I guess I could go back to school. Guess what? A lot of schools are not able to process this so quickly. You're not able to get the I-20 so fast. So always consider the fallbacks, then pursue and try to find the employer or another employer. Now, today, if you're an employer and you're employing H-1Bs and you're laying them off, caveat, do know that when you file for an H-1B for an individual, you have to pay a reasonable amount for their return home. Reasonable. Right now with COVID-19, there are a lot of flight tickets that go for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. We see news online and on Wechat and other things. There are people who charter flights to go home. That's not reasonable. Okay, so for an employer, you can give the option of a flight or a cash equivalent to normal flight going back home. So the employer, if you're hiring H-1B and you're considering laying them off, do know that there is that responsibility as well. Now, one question we get a lot is, hey, I'm on the H-1B, my hours are reduced, or I'm unemployed. Couldn't I take unemployment insurance? Don't. If your eventual goal is to want to stay here in the US, get the green card, my suggestion right now is don't touch unemployment. Don't touch anything that will be considered public charge. Don't touch anything that isn't earned, because the regulation right now is so much in flux. And we have a lovely guy in White House who is, let's just say, not so friendly to immigration. I would err on the side of caution and say, don't take any of those. What if today you're on other visas, L1, E2, or O1? Remember, if you're on these visas, do know that you are able to, whoops, I jumped out a little earlier. Do know that when you do initial applications and when you do renewals, there are requirements for you to keep a number of employees. These are W-2s. So this comes in play, especially when today you're applying for a renewal or when you're applying for a green card that is an upgrade to the visa. So at this time during COVID-19, if you're faced with layoffs, our suggestion is try as best as you can to comply with the needs of the visas and try to defer these furloughs or defer these layoffs for as long as possible, because this will pass, COVID-19. But if you're denied your visa, it may be difficult to get it back. All right, so one suggestion for people who are on F1, for people who are on OPT, people who are on H-1B, or other type of work visas, get your green card as soon as possible. You're not tied to any employers. You're not restricted in your work. You can hang out on your couch. You can do nothing. All right, so that's the suggestion that I have for all my clients who are doing that. Now, speaking of green cards, did you know a green card holder has certain rights and certain obligations? One of which is you have to stay here in the US for a certain amount of time every year. But during COVID-19, if you are not in the US, you don't want to fly back in the US because it's dangerous, what do? How long can you stay abroad? So let's first talk about the responsibilities and the requirements and the rights. Of course, you have the right to stay here in the US as a resident for as long as you want, and you have the right to either choose to be employed or don't be employed. The other is, in terms of requirements, you do have to stay in the US for 6 months or more every year. A lot of people are confused and they say, no, my relatives from Taiwan, they just fly in every 6 months. They come here, have a burger, and then they leave. Well, the rule is that you have to be here 6 months a year. And in previous years, they're not too keen on enforcing this, but now they are. Think of it this way. You're going down the highway. Here in California, it's a 405, it's a 5, whatever. You're going down the highway, everyone's speeding. That's like the LPRs, the green card holders who don't come in and live for 6 months a year. But occasionally, you do see police pulling them over. Now, they're being pulled over more and more often. So more green card holders are being caught up in this issue, right? So suggestion is, do stay here for 6 months a year or longer, and you can avoid all these issues. But what if you just can't do it? What if you just can't stay here for 6 months? You have to be abroad. In this case, at COVID-19, what if you are scared of flying? Any stay outside the US as a green card holder less than 6 months, we already know. Perfect, no problem. Just come back in before the 6 month ends. But what if you have to go beyond the 6 months and maybe extend up to 12 months? In this situation, our suggestion is prepare all of your documentation prior to coming in, state all the reasons in writing, or have substantial evidence to prove what you're saying. Maybe family members are sick, business interruption in Taiwan or wherever you are, that you can't come back in. You know, you have a lot to lose over there. But the important thing is, but you do have and you plan on having permanent residency here. Do you have a house here? Do you have a bank account here? Do you have immediate family here? All right. All those things will help you support the fact that this was not your fault. So if it's within 12 months, I would say it's still okay. What if it's more than 12 months? Folks, if it's more than 12 months and you're a green card holder, you may have abandoned your green card. You know, I recall a few years ago, we had an election, presidential election, while the candidates said he had the green card, but he hadn't come into the US for a very long time, therefore he lost the green card. That is precisely what he's talking about. So if you've been gone from the US consecutively for 12 months or more as a green card holder, you effectively have lost your green card. But is that written in stone? Are there ways to get it back? Of course. So if today it's you being sick or there's reasons beyond your control that you cannot come back, you can always go to the embassy to try to get a return resident visa. Okay? Or if you feel like your reasons are strong enough, there's some people who are brave who will say, I'll just fly and I'll see if they let me in. And that has proven to work for some people as well. So our suggestion, of course, is don't stay outside for 6 months or more. If you think you are going to do that, then plan ahead and get the re-entry permit. In Chinese, some people call it 回美证, some people call it 白皮书, but get that before you leave because you can only apply while you're here in the United States. Getting the re-entry permit will allow you to stay outside of the US for 2 years at a time. You don't have to come back in. Basically, you tell the US government, peace out for 2 years. So, COVID-19 or not, these are some of the compliance issues that we should keep in mind. For visitors, 6-month cumulative here in the US, because anything beyond 6 months, really, you're living here, you're not a visitor anymore. And trust me, you can only go to Disneyland for so long. Keep in mind, B1, B2 visitors and SL visitors cannot work here. A lot of questions we get is people who are here with US citizen children. Oh, I would like to stay here with them. Well, you know, in Canada, there is a visa that allows parents to stay with their kids, but here in the United States, no, there isn't. I know it sounds cruel, but we have to find options beyond the visitor for these parents. Now, what if today you're an F1 student or you know somebody who's an F1 student? Keep in mind, there are some issues, COVID-19 or not, okay? One thing is CPT. All right, to some people, it sounds like a lovely word because you can work as a student. To others, maybe some lawyers, it's a dirty word, okay? You have to be very careful in how you employ the CPT with your curriculum so that you don't get in trouble in the future. Now, second point over there, I say it in Chinese and I'll say it in English, pay to stay schemes or 挂靠. Don't ever do that. If you have friends who are considering doing that, never do it, okay? There are always schools out there that are legit. Don't go to these guacao schools, all right? Know your options. Besides the F1 and later on the H1B, there's so many other options, okay? So if you know these options, you'll be able to avoid the H1B because the H1B has become such a beast, such a difficult thing to get. And therefore, if at all possible, avoid the H1B. Now, if today you are an H1B employee, know your LCAs because that will tell you what you need to comply with and whether during COVID-19, are you falling out of status or not. And of course, if you're an H1B, please talk to your employer about getting you the green card. And keep in mind, it's not just your employer who can get you the green card. It's Uncle Bob's company. It's Auntie Jane's company. It's any other company that can get you the green card. Don't just be tunnel vision and focus on one. Finally, if you're a green card holder, make sure to understand that you have to be here in the US for 6 months. And if you can't, plan ahead. Also, if you're thinking about giving up your green card, always have Plan B. Plan B meaning, is there another immediate family member who can apply for you when you want it back? All right. So these are things to know, good things to know, COVID-19 or not. Quickly go through the options. I'm out of time. But if today you're extraordinary, if you think you're very good, there is that option. A quick story. We have a German national who is a German Kung Fu master. Folks, how many people practice Kung Fu in Germany? 200, but he's number 1 out of 200. He gets the extraordinary ability green card. How about things such as L1? So if today you're a foreigner, foreign company coming into the US, stuff like Toyota, they're a Japanese-based company, or for Taiwan, Foxconn, okay? So that's an option. There are other things such as green cards, or if today you have different nationalities besides Taiwan, you can pursue the TN if you're a Canadian or Mexican, so on and so forth. And of course, get the green cards as soon as possible. Finally, for international students, here's a gift from the government. It's called the E2. If you would like to find out more, please Google it, find out what it is, because if you have ever thought of being an entrepreneur, this is a great option for you. All right, so this is my contact. We'll be sharing all these slides with all the presenters. And with this, we are now moving to the Q&A session.